Hi, and welcome to Right On. I am your podcast host. My name is John Abrahamson, and I'm a published author. And today's episode 4 is really more about general tips. The first few episodes, I gave some tips for aspiring authors, and I thought it made sense to start with an episode now about whether if you're an aspiring author or someone who's been working on a current manuscript or multiple. It relates to a blog post that I posted, 4 or 5 years ago, and I think those tips are still relevant, so I thought it would make sense to publish that now. So my first tip is just knock out the first draft. Don't worry about grammar, don't worry about structure, don't worry about too much detail. Just get all the ideas out. Don't worry about, because they say there's a rule of thumb. It's easier to edit a page of bad writing than it is to edit a blank page, meaning just knock out that first draft. The good writing comes in the rewriting. That's such a key step. One of the hurdles you might run into if you don't just knock out the first draft and you care about how each word and sentence and structure, how all of it sounds up front, is that you'll get caught up in just rewriting the same stuff over and over and over instead of just finishing the story. So do a complete brain dump, knock out the first rough draft, and then go back and edit. The second tip I'd say is don't worry about the word count. I got caught up when I was publishing my first book. For years, I got caught up with trying to, make it sound like Dan Brown or Steve Berry. And my wife brought up a good point. She said, why do you plan the word count? Why do you get caught up in that? Just write the story the way it's meant to be told. You might find out the story is only supposed to be 10,000 words. You might find it needs to be 200,000 words. Don't focus on that up front. Now, there is a caveat. If you become this big-time author with a contract and you have to publish 2 books, 3 books a year, whatever that contract is, they may require you to have a certain word count. That's a different story. Our focus with this podcast and with these tips is to help you just publish your first book. So don't worry about word count. Can you shoot for a certain length? Absolutely. But don't get caught up in it. Do not get caught up with it. How many times have you read a book where you felt like, man, that could have been 20,000 words less? Like there was just so much extra fluff in the story, and probably because they got caught up in the word count. There are some people that like a lot of detail. There are certain people that like to read stories on how they take 3 pages to describe the color of the paint when you walk into the room. And that's fine. But my underlying point is just focus on telling the story. The word count stuff can come later. The third tip I'll say is, I know I was my own worst enemy. So I felt like I was writing good stuff, a page turner, some good action, well-paced type of thing, a solid thriller, but it was never good enough. I was seeking perfection, and I knew I would never find it. So you will be your worst critic. It's okay. Just push through it. It's never going to be good enough. You'll always have a better story in your head. It'll never come out the exact way that you have it in your head. So you will have a population that will give you 5 stars, 4 stars, typically friends and family. There will be some fans out there that pop up and are like, ooh, I don't know this person, but they gave me a good rating. That feels good. But the flip side to that is there will always be someone that will just tear it to shreds. It doesn't mean it's bad writing. It just means either A, it's not for them, right? It's not the target audience. Or B, they're just internet trolls, and that's going to happen regardless. You can have the best book ever written. It's not going to please everyone. So you're going to be your worst enemy. Just push through that. Another tip would be don't wait for inspiration. We talked about this on an earlier episode. The bottom line is writers write. They don't talk about writing. It's a craft. I mentioned before, it's like going to the gym or like bathing or eating or brushing your teeth. You have to do it daily. It needs to be part of your routine. You can't wait for inspiration. You might call it writer's block. The bottom line is to get through writer's block is to sit down and write. You can't just say, I'm not writing today because I just don't have the inspiration. That's the whole point. It's just like working out. Like, oh, I'm not going to work out today because I'm not inspired to work out. You're still going to work out if you want to have a healthy physique or just be healthy in general. So those are the top 4 tips. The last couple is every writer has their own process, meaning the tips that I'm giving you with all of these episodes on your podcast, it might not directly impact you, but it might. There might be some little gold nuggets that you can pull from this. So, for example, I'm talking mostly about writing fiction. You might have a journal or a memoir or biography, whatever it is, or poetry, a blog, whatever it is, there's some general underlying tips that you can take from this. So, for example, some writers will join meetups or groups or attend writers' workshops, which are fantastic. You get to learn quite a bit about the craft there. Attend free webinars. I mean, they're everywhere. Listen to podcasts like the one you're listening to now. You can buy books about writing. But the only way to get better at writing is to actually write. So not everyone can get up at 6 a.m. and write for an hour, or go to Starbucks or some coffee shop with their Mac and their peppermint mocha. Like, not everyone has the same schedule. So there might be some tips that quite honestly can't align with your schedule. But the important thing is that you just find the time to write and you write. So, find out what your process is. For example, there might be people that need to plan out every chapter ahead of time using Excel, Google Docs, pad and pen. There are other people just sit down and write, just start, typing out, their story from start to finish. So, keep that in mind. Don't get caught up in everyone else's process. Find what works for you. And then the last one I'll say is write about what you're passionate about. There's this old adage that I was confused with for a long time where it says writers, how should I say this? Writers should write what they know. And that one kind of caught me off guard for a while because I said, well, I don't want to write what I know. Like, I'm not a spy. So does that mean I shouldn't write about being a spy or like a James Bond character or like a Robert Langdon, Dan Brown type character because I'm not a symbologist? And I after more conversations with my wife, I think I have a better grasp of this. And the quote isn't saying don't write about things such as that, but it's more in line with write what I'm familiar with, meaning, yes, I need to research. Yes, I need to read a bunch of books and watch movies about thrillers and stuff like that. But it's what it means is don't take a stab at doing something you're not familiar with. Not something you don't know, because that's what research is for, but something you're not familiar with. For example, I don't read romance novels. So I'm not just going to go in cold and write a romance novel. I can try, but it probably won't hit because I don't read romance novels. I'm not in that space. So I would need to get into that space before I would attempt it. So that's what that means. Meaning, write what you're passionate about. If you don't know anything about it, then do what you can to learn about it before you write about it. So those are my tips for now. Hope you enjoyed it. Episode 4, and write on.